So a teaser for the new Starfleet Academy show just dropped, and boy did it stir things up online. But we're going to look at one critique that goes way beyond just "I don't like it." This argument claims the show is an intentional act of self-destruction. Today, we're not going to review the teaser. Instead, we're going to dissect the anatomy of that very powerful and very specific argument.
And this quote right here, this is basically the whole argument in a nutshell. See, the point isn't just, hey, this show looks bad. No, the claim is that it's designed to be bad, a final defiant gesture from a studio that, according to this critic, has kind of given up on its own franchise.
Okay, so how on earth do you build a case that traumatic? Well, it all starts by framing the entire argument with a really powerful and kind of wild historical analogy.
To really get what this person is saying, you gotta know about this ship, the Graf Spee. Back in 1939, it was this powerful German battleship, and it got cornered by the British. The captain had a choice: surrender or something else. He chose something else. He sailed it out into the harbor and just blew it up for everyone to see. It was this huge, public, defiant act of destroying yourself rather than giving up.
And right there, that's the heart of this entire critique. The source draws a direct line from that historical event to this new show. They're calling it the studio's Graf Spee moment, a conscious choice to go down in a blaze of glory instead of trying to fix a franchise that they see as being backed into a corner.
All right, so with that pretty dramatic setup, let's get into the nitty-gritty. The first big piece of evidence the critique points to is all about the visuals, specifically the casting and the set design. So the argument really drills down on two things you can see with your own eyes. First, it points to casting choices that it feels are a major departure from what the franchise is known for. And second, it takes serious aim at the design of the starship bridges, claiming they're going for this cool and moody vibe that just isn't practical for, running a starship.
And this slide really lays out the argument visually, at least from this critic's point of view. On the one side, you've got the classic bridge design. They describe it as compact, efficient, totally functional. And on the other side, you've got the modern take, dark, huge, and driven by aesthetics, which they argue leads to a layout that just doesn't make any sense for command.
And, if you wanted to sum up the entire feel of that criticism in one memorable line, this is it. It's a pretty vivid image, you have to admit.
Okay, but the critique doesn't stop with just how things look. The next big point is all about logic, or, the supposed lack of it. We're talking about the writing and whether the show even follows its own scientific rules.
It really zeroes in on this one specific moment from the teaser that involves a hologram on a bridge that's been all blown up. And it asks a pretty simple, fundamental question. Does this scene even respect the show's own rules for how holograms work?
So here's the logic puzzle, right? A hologram is made of light and force fields. It's not a solid person, so it shouldn't be able to trip over a real piece of metal debris on the floor. The argument is that seeing a hologram react to physical damage like that is a major flaw, a sign that the writers are just ignoring their own rulebook.
And then there's the writing itself. The critique pulls out this one specific line of dialogue and basically holds it up as Exhibit A for what it calls nonsensical, pseudo-intellectual writing that just sounds deep but doesn't actually mean anything.
So you've got this big, dramatic metaphor, you've got complaints about the visuals, questions about the logic, and it all leads to one final huge question that makes up the third part of this whole critique. Who is this show even for?
This chart does a pretty good job of showing what the critique calls the audience dilemma. The argument is that the show is basically trapped. On the one hand, you're supposedly pushing away the old fans who have been here forever with all these changes. But on the other hand, potential new viewers aren't going to jump in because it's just too, sci-fi.
And that brings us to the critique's big finish. It's arguing that this strategy is the absolute worst of both worlds. In this view, it fails to keep the loyal fans happy, and it fails to bring in new ones, leaving the show stuck in the middle with no real audience at all.
So, after walking through this whole argument, from that wild Graf Spee metaphor all the way down to the writing and the audience, we're left with the critic's big, provocative final thought. Is this just a show going in a weird direction, or is this, as the source claims, a sign that the franchise is completely and utterly cooked? It really makes you think about where we draw the line between just criticizing something and building a whole narrative of intentional failure.